Well, it looks like the redesign for the Super Famicom in Japan got a special name, Super Famicom Jr. And it is a lot smaller than the original. And I believe it was released in about 1998, which was almost 2 years into the life cycle of the Nintendo 64. And again, this was released to streamline and reduce the production cost of the Super Famicom to keep it viable in the marketplace and to keep people buying it. So the packaging is very small, and again, it looks like to me it was almost created by some sort of third-party manufacturer, but it is official. It just doesn't seem to be very uniform as the United States packaging tends to be. But what they did preserve was the Super Famicom logo colors, blue, red, green, and yellow. The side has blue, red, green with specifications, and yellow. Yep, and there's the copyright date, 1998, Nintendo. On the bottom, alright, no styrofoam. Nintendo of Japan is learning. Bad for the environment. So we're going to open this one up like we did with the Famicom AV. And see what we have. Again, no hookups. Just one controller, just the system, and of course the paperwork. A warning, something about the AC adapter. And then of course the instruction manual for the Super Famicom Jr. And as with all of the Nintendo cartridge-based systems, the back of the manual, you have the sticker of the serial number which matches that on the bottom of the console. But before we take a look at the console, let's take a look at the controller. We saw a major overhaul in the design of the controller with the Famicom AV and the Super NES 2. Not so much is the case here with the Super Famicom Jr. It's almost identical to the original Famicom controller. It's got the multicolored buttons. The difference is that they did a cost-saving measure by eliminating the painting or the silk screening or however they get things printed onto the plastic surface. Instead, much like the N64 controller, they embossed it or etched it in to the actual plastic, and I'm sure that saves money. So normally select and start would be printed on the plastic. Instead, it's a raised engraving. And instead of saying Super Famicom, it says Nintendo, kind of like the N64 controller does. This makes it more universal, and I'll talk about that once we take a look at the redesigned Super Nintendo in the United States. And again, on the top, the L and R buttons. In early editions of the Super Famicom and Super NES controllers, L and R were printed on the buttons. In later editions, they were just embossed into the plastic. One thing I do notice is the controller cord length is long, just like the US release. And again, it makes it more universal. Talk about that once we take a look at the US redesign of the Super Nintendo. But for now, let's take a look at the system itself. The little baby Super Famicom Jr. This is definitely a streamlined version of the console in that it's a lot smaller and that they've eliminated quite a few features to save some money. Cartridge slot is the same deal. Very specific to fit Super Famicom cartridges. No other cartridges will fit. The power and reset buttons have been moved. The power switch is still a switch. The reset button is still a button. But there's no LED power light to let you know that the system's on. So you have to pay attention to whether it's the dots match with on or off. One other big thing that they took away was the eject button. There's no way to eject the game, but again, that was never really vital to making the system work. You could always pull it out by hand. And actually, however they did it, I'm not sure, but it is easier to take out cartridges from these redesigns than it is from the original. So the eject button really is not necessary. So very simple design, very little aesthetic cues or painting or silk screening of graphics or words onto the plastic. That's all been done away with in an effort to save money. Controller ports on the front have a black color. It's darker than usual. Sides, really nothing to note. The input, DC in for the AC adapter, and AV out. No more RF. That was eliminated to save money. AV was becoming the norm. People weren't using RF anymore. More TVs had composite video and audio input standard, so that was the way to go. One other cost-saving measure that you can't really see, and that wasn't even ever officially supported by Nintendo, was that of S-Video. Both the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the original models, supported S-Video. If you plugged in a third-party AV cable that had an S-Video adapter on it, you could enjoy S-Video quality, which was quite a bit clearer than the yellow composite video that was supplied with the Nintendo cable. Nintendo, to my knowledge, in Japan or in the United States, never manufactured an AV cable with S-Video and composite video along with the audio. But that doesn't matter for this version or the US version, because the re-release does not support S-Video. As far as I know, everything's there, the components are there, it's just the traces in the circuit board are not connected to make it work. So, for whatever reason, that was one of the cost-saving measures. And on the bottom, of course, there's the specs sticker and the serial number sticker that matches the instruction manual. One more redesign to go, and that is the Super NES 2. And here it is, the Super NES 2, or the Super NES control deck as it was usually called. Again, the box is a little bit bigger, and I believe that this was released in a couple different configurations. I believe you could get this with Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past packed in, as well as Yoshi's Island packed in. I believe those were two pack-in games that were available. You can see the graphics and the aesthetics on the box have been updated to match current graphic standards with the N64 and the newer consoles. Funny part is, this console can't do graphics like that. Even the little details, such as the 16 bits, are no longer just flat circles. They have a little bit of dimension to them. So does the logo and other design cues. We got these CGI graphics, and even by today's standards, they look pretty primitive. CGI graphics, a big Bowser there, different shots of the system. And on the back, just a bunch of different screenshots of the popular games, such as Kirby, Tetris, Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario Kart, and F-Zero. This is one of the first systems where you actually had to scan the serial number of the system to kind of thwart bogus returns. So let's see what we got in here. I think I see, styrofoam. Come on, Nintendo of America. What's going on with all this styrofoam? What have we? Alright, paperwork. Not much. Definitely streamlined. This particular model, I believe, was released in 1997. Yeah, this re-release was done in 1997, which was actually before the Japanese re-release of the Super Famicom. Instruction manuals all in black and white. Even the picture on the front. Consumer precautions booklet. Excited about your new system? Subscribe to Nintendo Power, of course. Controller, what have we here? Same deal as the Super Famicom Jr. Nintendo has been etched into the plastic instead of printed on the plastic. The buttons, however, match more with the American release. Lavender X and Y and purple B and A buttons. The indentations on Y and X are the same as usual. And on the back here, I was mentioning before when I was going through the Super Famicom redesign, there's a little bit of universality, if that's a word. They wanted to make this release more universal. So with that in mind, let me take a look here at here we go. We have the redesigned Super Famicom and the redesigned Super NES controller side by side. If you take a look on the back, you remember when I showed you the redesigned Famicom and NES controller, they had different part numbers and they had different logos and titles. Here, it's the exact same thing. It just says Nintendo Controller, model number SNS102. And it has both the logos for the US Super Nintendo Entertainment System and the Japanese Super Famicom. So it looks like Nintendo was going for an easier route as far as keeping things consistent within the regions, less money spent on variations. And you see that here in the logos printed on the back, and of course the now standard length of the controller cord. You get the same amount of cord. And that meant they could use exactly the same components, minus the buttons, of course. That would be too jarring between the regions, too jarring of a difference. They were able to use the exact same components to save some money. And additionally in the box, we got the AC adapter for power, and then we have the composite video and stereo audio AV cable with, of course, the Nintendo proprietary jack. Take a look at the little baby Super Nintendo 2. They never really dubbed it the Super Nintendo Jr. They just kept the same name and gave it a new look. But it's very similar in appearance to the Super Famicom redesign. I prefer the cartridge slot of the Super Famicom. I think the contrasting plastic gives it a nice look. The buttons for power and reset, of course, are keyed as far as color goes to match the regions. Like the Super Famicom logo better. All it is raised plastic on the Super Nintendo 2. Other than that, they're exactly the same. Nothing on the sides. 2 black controller ports on the front. The multi-out, again, which no longer supports S-video like it did for the original Super NES or Super Famicom. The AC adapter. And in the United States, the phone number for the Nintendo World Class Service Center. On the back, got the spec sticker, the serial number, which doesn't match with any sort of sticker on the back of the instruction manual in the United States. It's only for Japan. So with the re-release of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and the Super Famicom, we're really starting to see more of a convergence among differences in the regions, or an elimination of the differences between the regions. And it's going to become even more complete, that elimination of the regional variances with the Nintendo 64. We're going to take a look at that in the final video.